Welcome to Canada's podcast.
Hello, I'm Mario Taneguzzi, managing editor of Canada's podcast. Today's guest on Calgary's podcast is Lourdes, who is a Calgary-based entrepreneur. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I didn't describe what you do because you do a lot. We're going to go through each of the enterprises that you're involved in, and maybe if you could describe them for us. Let's start with Need Technologies. What is that?
Sure. So that's the latest venture. So it's a technology company that has a software for food rescue and food recovery. And that sort of was born from the Leftovers Foundation, which I know is on your list to chat about as well.
Okay, let's talk about Leftovers Foundation.
Sure.
What is that? And tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, so that started back in 2012. So it's a food rescue organization. Actually, Mario, I was thinking back on the history of Leftovers, and you were the first journalist to write not one, but two stories on it. And it certainly helped with the success of the organization.
Excellent.
And what they do, I'm not there anymore. I just finished my board term. I was executive director for almost 10 years. And they're a food rescue organization. So they pick up food from vendors, grocery stores, retailers, and take that food to service agencies that are in need of food. And that is across 3 provinces now, which is kind of crazy to think because it just started with me and my car.
Yeah, and tell me, a little bit of the history of that, the Leftovers Foundation. What I guess motivated you to start something like this?
Certainly, yeah. I sort of had an aha moment. I went with my cousin to go pick up excess bread at a local bakery here in Calgary, and there was a lot of it. And I think when you see the sheer amount, 200 pounds, 150, 200 pounds of bread. It's perfectly good. It was baked that morning. You really think about, other stores sort of wasting or creating this excess and where can we bring it so that people can put food on their tables. And so it started with one location, and with your help and the help of the Calgary community and volunteers, it grew to about rescuing 10,000 pounds of food per week across 3 provinces. Wow.
That's amazing, right?
Yeah.
It kind of doesn't blow you away when you think about that. When you said the humble beginnings out of your car, right? And what that foundation has done.
It really does, yeah. And I remember, organizing all of these logistics on pen to paper and Excel documents. And now, the charity created this app, which is now Need Technology. So I'm still in the food rescue space, but more on the tech side.
All right. You're also involved with something called Fresh Roots. So maybe describe that for me.
Yeah, so I'm the CEO of Fresh Roots right now. I'm a founder of that organization, and it sort of came out of the Leftovers Foundation. We were incubating a bunch of different projects within the food system and really trying to understand how we could get affordable food to households with dignity. And so we provide a mobile grocery store model that we pop up in different locations around Calgary and soon to be Edmonton. And we make sure that people get affordable, culturally appropriate food with no proof of income. So it's a pop-up grocery store.
Oh, excellent. Okay, then. While we're in kind of the wellness area, and let's talk about Soma. Help me if I pronounce it wrong, but Soma Hammam?
Yeah, that's perfect.
And spa. And when did you start that? And tell me a little bit about what Soma is.
Certainly, that is a traditional spa. So we started back in 2010. Lots of different roller coaster rides that company's been on throughout the years, and then through COVID, service-based industry. But we sort of landed a spot within the Marriott Hotel and have sort of upcoming partnerships in other Marriott hotels. And it's a traditional spa that's made for hotel clientele.
And how did you get into doing this?
I was, I think back on all the hats I have worn and continue to wear. But I'm actually a certified medical esthetician. So I can do things like laser and peels. And it was sort of a job that put me through my undergraduate and my master's degree. And so I started a spa that I thought would be based on some of these medical aesthetic things. But it turns out we sort of did a 180 with the company, and our self-care sort of philosophy is more time-based and more based on, doing treatments that are more natural. So we don't do any of the medical aesthetic stuff anymore, but we certainly advocate for people taking the time for themselves.
Okay, and let's move on to from spas to real estate, and
I forgot about that one.
And then you're involved in hive developments. Tell me what that what that development company does.
Yeah, so that I like to describe as my first child. So that was my first company. I have a master's degree in environmental design. So my professional background is in urban planning, and so that company takes on community consultation work, urban planning, and urban design.
Okay, then. What got you? You mentioned your master's at U of C. What got you involved in that area? Like, what was the appeal for urban planning?
I thought I was going to be an architect. My dad was an engineer. I thought, I really love architecture and design. And once I started to really understand sort of urban planning and really that sort of architecture, but on a wider, sort of more broader basis when we're designing cities instead of designing buildings. That sort of piqued my interest of, how a city can take on a certain personality. Calgary has a personality, that's different from New York and Los Angeles and Manila. And so how can we really, how have we built these cities and all the nuances that go into urban planning? And that's certainly still my one of my first passions and my first loves.
All right. Now, somebody listening to all this, Lourdes, is going to wonder, how the heck does this woman do all of this? So answer that. How do you do that?
Well, I want to be really cheeky and say I don't. I'm not by myself. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I'm also a new mom. I have a 2-year-old son, and so throw that into the mix, and I definitely don't do it all. I sort of have started one company and one kind of falls off my plate, and so I want to build these ventures, particularly on the social venture side. To ensure that there's a good succession plan and that it can be taken on by someone else and the vision sort of lives on. But I have really great teams that surround each organization, from the spa to development consulting to food system work, and so it certainly takes a village, and that's what I will attribute it to.
And let's talk about that. It takes a village. A lot of your work involves community. Tell me why community is so important to you.
Yeah, growing up, I think we lived our family sort of lived by this motto. And it's a famous quote from a long time ago. And it goes something like this: you'll only pass through this world but once. If there's any good that I can do or any kindness that I can show, let me do it now, because I might not pass this way again. And my grandfather was a lawyer in the Philippines, and he inscribed that quote into one of his legal notebooks. And we found it after he passed. And so it's sort of been this sort of theme, I guess, passed on through generations. And my parents immigrated here to Canada from the Philippines when they were fairly young and met in Edmonton, Alberta. And so we always sort of had this sense of it takes a village to raise a family and have young children and sort of push for a career and put food on the table. And so sort of this idea of community, not in the sort of food security sense, but this sense of community has certainly always been around my family. And I've sort of taken that and put it into food systems work and entrepreneurialism.
So in terms of being an entrepreneur, Lourdes, Did you have any like mentors along the way? Did you, whether they be actual, people that you knew, or even people that you saw, out there that
Yeah.
were examples of what you should do?
In every field, I can say I've had a mentor. Whether it's sort of general entrepreneurialism or from the development world in urban planning and architecture. I think it was always important for me to learn, and for me, I learn by being really hands-on, and that means asking a lot of questions and being
Yeah.
really devoted to my work. And so, I've certainly have had mentors in every field that I've interacted with. And recently, I think there's been a lot of mentors that look like me that maybe I haven't met yet, but certainly I'm able to watch as an example. And so that's been really helpful, because when I started this journey, 12 years ago, there
Yeah.
was not a lot of people in Calgary in particular that I could really relate to. And now there's so many groups, there's so many organizations that are there to support, and I found that that's been a really great support system for me.
When you look at being an entrepreneur here in Calgary, what would you say the biggest bonuses or biggest positives are of being an entrepreneur in this city?
Calgarians, I find, so I was born in St. Albert, but don't tell anybody. I moved to Calgary when I was 2 months old, so
Oh,
I
wow.
just pretend that I'm a Calgarian.
Yeah.
But I think Calgarians really like to try new things. And I think that's important if you're a budding entrepreneur, that you have a community that supports you, whether it's giving advice or if it's being a consumer of your product. And the Calgary community has always been there to support, whether that's food rescue or a new spa, or developers wanting to engage communities and do something different. I think there's sort of this openness and sort of entrepreneurialism within Calgarians, whether they are or not, that has carried me through, certainly.
So when you look at the entrepreneurial journey, what would you say your biggest challenges have been that and maybe still are?
At first it was really, around, having to do with those mentors that really were relatable. But that's changed now. But certainly that was a big hurdle, I think. I think the other hurdle is sort of self-inflicted, that I don't come from a business background at all. And so learning the lingo, whether it's sort of on the, accounting finance side, or, learning the new tech lingo, it's all new, and it's all new experiences for me. So I think that hurdle is sort of self-inflicted. I have thought about going back and getting my MBA, but I can't imagine going back to school and having a 2-year-old, to be honest.
No, I can't imagine at all without even a 2-year-old. So, if you had a protege, and if you were a mentor to somebody that was younger, what advice would you give them about being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I would say it's important to include your customers in your plan. And I'm a real advocate for that. Not only on the social, on the entrepreneurial side, sort of like the traditional business side, is to always, kind of to do customer acquisition, you need to talk to your customers, but also from the on the social impact side, we have to, have the tools to engage communities properly, to bring them on the journey that will kind of put society in a better position. And we cannot do this work without them. I think traditionally what we've done is, told vulnerable communities or marginalized folks, how they should live, what they should eat, what they should buy, what they should spend their money on. And I think if we kind of reverse that and really think about how we can include communities in the discussion of what a future could look like for them, I think that that would be really beneficial for everybody.
Okay, so you've done a lot of things. When you were growing up, what did you want to be?
Oh my goodness. I wanted to, I still do, want to be a food critic on some type of um, food TV show. I would watch food TV with my dad, and we would watch like Iron Chef with my sisters and, pretend that we were Iron Chefs ourselves. Turns out I'm a terrible cook.
Oh,
My sister took all of that talent for herself. And so I am still learning, but that would sort of be like my ultimate if I could just eat food all day and comment on it.
any favorites?
Oh, well, I like to call myself a pastaholic. So I love Italian food. I love anything in noodle form, actually.
Hmm.
But I am Filipino, and so I do love Filipino food, even though it's a lot of meat. But I love trying new things. And I think that's the beauty about food is that there's so many nuance in taste.
Now, you mentioned obviously earlier in the episode here that we have a history together that goes back quite a long time. But and I'm getting older, so my memory fades. But did you not? You told me once that you were also involved in beauty pageants, right?
Oh my goodness! Did I tell you that?
Yes, you did.
Or did you run into my mom? Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Years and years and decades and a lifetime ago, I held some pageant crowns for both locally, nationally, and internationally. I competed in beauty pageants, which sounds so archaic, but I did it. And I still, one of my guilty pleasures is watching Miss Universe.
There you go. And what were these pageants?
So I competed in Miss Philippines Calgary, and I won that. And then I competed for Miss Philippines Canada and got first place. And then I competed in, what was it called? Miss Global. And I won that category.
Wow.
Long time ago, Mario. I never talk about it. It's a secret.
So let me ask, with your busy schedule and as you said, a young child, what do you do to relax?
Yeah, so I advocate for taking time to yourself, and so I certainly do that at the beginning and at the end of each day, just alone time, either journaling or reading, or just taking some quiet time. I love binging shows. I'm very normal in that way. And so I binge a bunch of silly reality shows. And I love spending time with my family. I am very, very close with my sisters. We live blocks from each other in a community called Bridgeland here in Calgary. And I love spending time with them. So I think that, you have to, make sure that your cup is full before you start to give to others.
Yeah, that's true. It's tough though for because you're always being an entrepreneur. Every entrepreneur that I know of, it's almost 24/7 that they're on the job, right?
Yeah.
Or thinking about it, right, in some fashion. So I guess that it's important to make sure you take that time to yourself, right?
Yeah, and I think you have to be like, for me anyways, I have to actively be cognizant of not around my family wanting to talk about business or wanting to talk about the things that I'm working on, because no one cares, like we have to connect with each other on a personal level. And so, but with working, like you said, 24 hours, it's hard to kind of turn that off. So it's something that I'll continue to work on for sure.
Besides binge watching TV, like, what do you have? Any passions, any hobbies or interests?
Yeah, I recently inherited the piano that we grew up playing.
Wow.
And I'm not very good, but I'm starting to tinker a little bit on the piano, and it's one of those things, I think, for me, anyways, that I have to actively try to have a hobby. It's something that my husband makes fun of me all the time, that I have no hobbies, and so I turn my hobbies into businesses, I guess, which I need to stop doing.
Is there anything that you haven't done that you would like to do? Everybody talks about a bucket list, right? Okay,
Oh my goodness. There's
what would
so
be at the
many,
top? What would be
so
at
many
the
things.
top?
I want to travel a bit more. And so I think with the tech company, I'm able to do that. But there's so much of the world that I want to see and I want my son to see. So that's certainly at the top of my list. I turn 40 next year. And so I'm hoping to make my 40th birthday, make sure I'm on a beach somewhere in Greece. So there's certainly that aspect of it. And of course, with the entrepreneurial brain, I have maybe about 100 different ideas of different companies that I want to launch. So that'll be further in my career.
So where do you think that came from? Like, you say entrepreneurial brain. Where do you think, the foundation of that is?
Yeah, certainly with my dad. He recently passed away in September, and so I've been reflecting a lot about how he raised us, and like I said, he was an engineer, but a very specific field that he worked in. So he worked on metallurgic failures, so failures for mechanical systems and different metals. And so he had sort of like the ultimate problem solving hat. And because he knew he would research and sort of figure out mathematically, why things failed. And so because of that, that my sisters and I kind of always understood how things worked.
Yeah.
And I think I will always have that problem solving hat. It's sort of like a legacy piece that I want to make sure that a skill that I really try to hone for him and for my career. But certainly I think it sort of started there and I've just taken it into different areas of my life.
So growing up as a kid, what do you think the key lessons were that you learned from your parents?
Yeah, I think I learned work ethic from my mom. She worked 3 jobs to make sure to put food on our table. My dad went back to school when we were little kids, which, seems unfathomable to me now. But, they had 3 little kids and he was doing his engineering degree at the U of C. And so my mom had to work long hours and for night shifts at the hospital and day shifts at a grocery store. And so I know that my work ethic or my propensity to not stop working certainly comes from her. I do get my entrepreneurialism from my dad. He started his own engineering company and sort of he did his time working at different firms and making sure he had mentors. So that was sort of another big value and big piece of how I grew up. And, I remember always like being at my cousin's house or being with my grandparents and really being surrounded by a family. And, if you are not close with your family, really being surrounded by a community. And I think that's important to not only problem solve, but, for mental health and to be around the people that really lift you up and really support you.
Oh, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Lourdes, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. That was fun.
All right. That was Lourdes Juan, who is a Calgary-based entrepreneur. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, managing editor of Canada's podcast. This has been Calgary's podcast. Thanks for joining us today.